The eye that just opened in this next scene shouldn't exist. Not in canon. Not in any bloodline chart Kishimoto ever drew. But watch closely, because in the next 10 minutes, you're going to see the exact moment the strongest Dōjutsu in the entire series gets born out of the worst night of Naruto's life. Stick around till the end, because what happens in that alley is going to change everything you think you know about the Uzumaki clan. And if you don't want to miss Chapter 2, where we find out exactly why this eye was hidden from Naruto in the first place, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe, ring that bell, and let's get into it. Chapter 1. The Eye That Shouldn't Exist. Konoha doesn't sleep on October the 10th. It never has, not once in the 6 years since the Ninetales clawed its way through the village gates and Minato Namikaze paid the only price steep enough to stop it. Lanterns go up along the main street. Stalls sell dango and grilled skewers and cold barley tea to families who lost fathers, mothers, brothers that night. Children run through the crowds with paper masks tied over their faces, laughing, chasing each other between the legs of adults who are trying very hard to smile. And in the middle of all of it, alone, 6-year-old Naruto Uzumaki sits on the edge of a fountain with his knees pulled up to his chest, watching a festival he was never invited to. You already know why. Everyone in this village knows why, even the ones too young to say it out loud. To them, Naruto isn't a boy. He's a reminder. A walking anniversary. And on the one night of the year when Konoha lets its grief boil closest to the surface, that reminder becomes very, very dangerous to be standing next to. He doesn't understand it yet, not fully. All he knows is that old man Hokage always finds an excuse to have him help out at the tower on this particular night, and that this year, for the first time, he slipped away from the ANBU escort because he wanted, just once, to see the lanterns up close instead of through a window. That decision is about to nearly get him killed. And it's about to wake up something inside him that isn't supposed to exist for another 11 years. Let's rewind an hour, because the setup matters here. Naruto had spent the afternoon the way he spends most afternoons, annoying Iruka-sensei at the academy by asking questions that were technically off-topic but somehow always circled back to what happens when a ninja dies, which, if you think about it, is a very heavy question for a 6-year-old to be quietly obsessed with. Iruka had brushed it off with the practiced patience of a man who's learned not to flinch at Naruto's stranger moments. He handed him a fresh set of kunai-throwing worksheets, and told him to go home before the festival crowds got too thick. Naruto did not go home. Instead, he wandered. He always wanders on nights like this, drawn to the noise and warmth of a village that has never once let him get close enough to feel it. He tells himself it's fine. He tells himself he doesn't care. But there's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from standing at the edge of a celebration that exists, in some twisted unspoken way, because of you, and even at 6, some part of Naruto understands that better than he'd ever admit. He's sitting by the fountain, watching a family share a plate of grilled rice cakes, when the first drunk on grief adult spots him. Not drunk on anything you're picturing. Konoha's festival stalls that night serve nothing stronger than barley tea and sweet plum juice. And that detail matters later, because it means the men who corner Naruto in 20 minutes are doing it with clear heads and cold intent, which is so much worse. Hey! A voice, low, aimed at him specifically. Isn't that the demon brat? Naruto's stomach drops the way it always does. He's up and moving before the man finishes the sentence, cutting between two stalls, ducking under a hanging string of paper lanterns. He's good at this. He's had practice. Most nights, this is where the story ends. A chase, a few blocks, an adult who gives up because chasing a 6-year-old through a festival crowd is more effort than his hatred is worth. Tonight is not most nights. Tonight there are 3 of them, and they're not drunk, and they're not giving up. Here's where I need you to lean in, because this next part is the whole reason we're here. Naruto cuts down a side street he doesn't recognize, one of the older residential blocks near the eastern wall, half-lit, mostly empty because everyone who lives there is out at the festival. His lungs are burning. His sandals slap against the stone. Behind him he can hear footsteps, 3 sets, spreading out the way trained shinobi spread out when they're not chasing a target so much as hurting one. That should have been his first clue that these weren't just angry civilians blowing off steam. But he's 6. He's terrified. He just wants to get home. He turns a corner, and hits a wall. Not a person, an actual dead end, A narrow alley boxed in by the backs of 3 buildings, no windows low enough to reach, no gaps wide enough to slip through. He spins around just as the 3 men round the corner behind him, and for the first time that night, Naruto really looks at them, and what he sees knocks the breath out of him worse than the running did. These aren't festival goers who got a little too worked up. 2 of them are wearing the plain gray of off-duty shinobi. The third, the one in front, the one who spoke first, has a scar running from his temple to his jaw, and his eyes have the flat, terrible calm of a man who has already decided how this ends. You know, the scarred man says, crouching down so he's closer to Naruto's height, every year, I tell myself I'm not going to do this. Every year, I light incense for my little brother and I go home. But every year I see you laughing, playing in the street like you belong here, and I think, why should the thing that killed him get to smile? I didn't, Naruto's voice cracks. I didn't kill anybody, you're just wearing his face. The man's voice doesn't rise. That's the part that makes it so much worse. There's no rage in it, just a horrible, settled certainty. The fox's face. And tonight, of all nights, I don't think I can look at it anymore. If you've watched enough of these alternate universe stories, you already know this scene. A cornered Naruto, a mob with murder in its eyes, a village that's looked the other way one too many times. It's the origin point of half the what-if premises out there. But I need you to understand, this isn't going to play out the way you've seen it play out before. Because this time, something in Naruto is about to answer back. The scarred man stands. Draws a kunai, not the training kind, the real kind, the kind that isn't meant to throw, only to finish something up close. Naruto presses himself against the dead-end wall, and for one full second, something inside him goes very, very quiet. You know that feeling right before you black out, that tunnel vision, ears ringing, world-tilting sensation? That's what it's like for Naruto in this moment, except instead of blacking out, everything gets sharper. The lantern light down the alley slows, like it's dragging through syrup. The sound of the man's sandals scraping forward stretches out into something almost musical. And somewhere behind his own eyes, Naruto feels a heat that has nothing to do with fear and everything to do with something ancient finally waking up. Let's pause here for a second, because I want to set the scene properly before we get to the part you've been waiting for. Every Dōjutsu in this world has an origin story rooted in trauma. The Sharingan wakes up in moments of loss and fear. The Byakugan is bred into the Hyuga line through centuries of discipline. The Rinnegan, the one this eye is supposed to be stronger than, awakens in a boy who watches his own mother die in front of him. But the Sōseigan doesn't wake up because of death. It wakes up because of a choice. And in this alley, cornered, 12 seconds from a kunai across his throat, 6-year-old Naruto Uzumaki makes one, even if he doesn't understand that he's making it. He doesn't choose to hate the man in front of him. He doesn't choose to hate the village that let this happen. In the one heartbeat he has left before the blade comes down, some deep, wordless part of him simply, stubbornly, refuses to accept that this is where his story ends. I don't want to disappear. That's it. That's the whole thought. Not I want to be strong. Not I want revenge. Just a small, furious refusal to stop existing. And something in his bloodline, something that has been asleep since before the Sage of Six Paths ever split chakra into anything at all, hears him. The scarred man's kunai comes down, and it never reaches him. Here's what the man will tell his interrogators later. When the Hokages A and B finally catch up with all 3 of them, he says the boy's eyes changed first. Not glowing, not menacing, just different, a spiral pattern bleeding out from the pupil in a color he couldn't quite name afterward. Something between deep violet and burning red, like a bruise catching firelight. He says it wasn't the eyes that stopped him, though. It was what happened to his arm. The kunai simply stopped. Not blocked. Not caught. It's like the last half-second of the strike unwound itself, the way you'd pull a thread back out of fabric, and the man found his hand suspended in midair, fingers slack, the weapon clattering uselessly to the ground, and he had absolutely no memory of deciding to drop it. He describes the sensation badly, because there aren't really words for it, like the universe had quietly, calmly, corrected a mistake he was in the middle of making. That's the Sōseigan's very first ability on full display, and it's worth naming clearly, because you're going to see it again and again as this series goes on. It doesn't fight the attack. It doesn't block it or reflect it or copy it, the way a Sharingan might. It simply refuses to let the harmful outcome finish happening, as if for one instant, reality itself remembers what it's supposed to look like without the damage, and quietly puts itself back. The two shinobi flanking the scarred man don't get the luxury of an explanation. They see their partner's strike fail, see the boy's eyes burning that impossible color in the lantern-lit dark, and their instincts, trained instincts, honed over years, scream at them to run. One does. The other freezes, caught somewhere between fight and flight, and that hesitation is what saves his life, because in the next second, a wave of pressure rolls off Naruto that has nothing to do with killing intent and everything to do with sheer, overwhelming life. Chakra so dense and so unfamiliar that every plant growing in the cracks of that alley wall visibly straightens toward him, like flowers turning toward the sun. The scarred man staggers back, clutching his numb hand, and for the first time that night, there's something other than hatred on his face. There's fear. What, he breathes, are you? Naruto doesn't answer. Naruto can't answer. Because by this point his small body has already spent more chakra than it has ever produced in its short life. And the moment the immediate threat fades from that animal part of his brain that's been screaming danger for the last 5 minutes, his knees buckle and the world goes dark. He hits the ground before any of the three men decide whether to finish what they started. They don't get the chance. If you want to know exactly what an Uzumaki NBU medic sees when she turns that corner 4 minutes later, that's coming right up. But first, let's talk about why nobody in this alley, not even Naruto, understands what just happened. Because that mystery is the engine of this entire series, and I promise you, the answer is so much bigger than a single bloodline limit. If you're new here, this is exactly the kind of deep dive what if storytelling this channel lives for. So go ahead and subscribe now. You don't want to miss where this goes. Her name doesn't matter yet, you'll get it in a later chapter, once she becomes more than a face and a mask. But for now, know this, she's ANBU, she's fast, and she's one of maybe 6 people in the entire village still capable of sensing the specific chakra signature that just detonated 3 streets over from the festival. She lands in the alley mouth in a crouch, blade already drawn, and takes in the scene in under 2 seconds. The way any good ANBU is trained to. 3 adult males, 2 fleeing, 1 frozen against the wall nursing a numb arm. A small boy, collapsed, breathing but unconscious, whisker-marked cheeks unmistakable even in the dark, and blood, not his. A thin line at his hairline where he must have caught the wall going down, nothing serious, already slowing. She doesn't waste time on the man against the wall. One look at his face tells her everything. He's not a threat anymore, he's in shock, and whatever happened here broke something in his understanding of the world that a pair of handcuffs isn't going to fix. She kneels beside Naruto instead, running triage hands over his small frame, and that's when she notices it. The thing that's going to make her sprint straight to the Hokage's tower instead of the hospital. His eyes are still open. Not conscious. His breathing is slow and even, deep in whatever exhausted unconsciousness his body dragged him into. But his eyes are open, unfocused, and the irises haven't fully faded back yet. In the low lantern light she can just make out the last ghostly traces of that spiral pattern, violet-red, fading like the last coals of a dying fire. She has spent 6 years around this village's shinobi elite. She's seen Sharingan activate mid-battle. She's studied Hyuga clan reports on Byakugan for cross-training purposes. She knows, in her bones, the visual signature of every known bloodline limit in the Land of Fire. She has never, not once, seen anything like this. Uzumaki, she murmurs, mostly to herself, because there's only one clan that pattern could possibly belong to, and there's only one member of that clan left standing in this entire village. She scoops Naruto up, careful, professional, the kind of gentleness that ANBU aren't exactly famous for but that she can't help extending to a 6-year-old who clearly just survived something that should have killed him, and disappears from the alley in a blur of movement, leaving the frozen, terrified man to be picked up by the backup team she signals in on her way out. Hiruzen Sarutobi is exactly where you'd expect the 3rd Hokage to be on the anniversary of the worst night of his career, alone in his office, lights low, staring out over a village he's spent the entire evening quietly worrying about, because every October the 10th carries this same low hum of dread underneath the festival noise. He's old enough to remember what real loss feels like, and wise enough to know that grief doesn't always stay where you put it. He's mid-sip of a cup of green tea, the old man's one small comfort on nights like this, when his ANBU medic drops through the window with an unconscious child cradled against her chest, and the tea is forgotten entirely. Report, he says, already on his feet, already moving toward them. She lays Naruto down on the small couch against the far wall with a care that doesn't match the urgency in her voice. Hokage-sama, 3 men cornered him near the eastern residential block. Attempted assault. He's stable, minor injuries, chakra exhaustion, nothing life-threatening. She hesitates, and for a woman trained to deliver bad news without flinching, that hesitation says a great deal. But before I found him, something happened. I don't have a full account yet. One of the attackers is in custody, and should be able to tell us more. What I can tell you is what I saw with my own eyes. Hiruzen's jaw tightens. Go on. His eyes were active when I arrived. A Dōjutsu pattern, spiraling, violet-red in color. I've cross-referenced every bloodline limit on record for this village and the neighboring clans. It doesn't match any of them. She pauses again. Hokage-sama, given the clan markings on his face and everything we know about his mother's lineage, I believe what I witnessed may be an Uzumaki bloodline trait. One that isn't in any of our records. The room goes very quiet. You have to understand what this means to a man like Hiruzen Sarutobi. He was Hokage during the era when Uzumaki, the hidden village that was the Uzumaki clan's true home, still stood as one of the great few ninjutsu powers of the Shinobi world, before 3 allied nations tore it down out of fear of exactly the kind of clan strength that made it a threat just by existing. He watched Kushina Uzumaki grow up an outsider in this village, brilliant and fierce and lonely in ways that mirrored the boy sleeping on his couch right now. He knew, better than almost anyone alive, that the Uzumaki clan's full bloodline potential had never been fully documented, because the people who might have understood it were wiped out before Konoha's scholars ever got the chance to study them properly. There are rumors. There have always been rumors. Old shinobi who served during the Second Shinobi World War occasionally mention, in hushed tones over cups of tea, stories of Uzumaki elders capable of things that shouldn't have been possible, soldiers who walked away from fatal wounds mid-battle, seals that seemed to think, chains that moved like they had a will of their own. Most of it gets dismissed as wartime exaggeration. Propaganda. Fear given shape by an enemy nobody fully understood. Hiruzen has never quite believed it was only that. He crosses to the couch and looks down at Naruto, small, breathing steady now, whisker marks stark against pale skin, blonde hair damp with sweat, and for a moment he doesn't see the Jinchuriki the village fears. He sees Kushina's boy. He sees Minato's son, and he feels, for the first time in longer than he'd like to admit, something close to real fear about what this village doesn't know it's raising in its midst. Wake the medical team, he says finally, voice steady in the way that decades of command make automatic even when your hands aren't quite as steady as your voice. Full workup, chakra pathways especially, and I want that eyewitness account from the man you took into custody the moment he's coherent enough to give it. He glances toward the window, toward the still distant sound of festival drums drifting up from the village below, oblivious to everything that just happened 3 streets away. And find Danzo before he finds this on his own. The ANBU medic straightens. Understood, Hokage-sama? She hesitates at the door. Sir, should I file this as a formal clan bloodline discovery? Standard procedure would require notifying the council. Hiruzen is quiet for a long moment. No, he says finally. Not yet. Not until I understand what we're dealing with. He looks back at the small sleeping form on his couch, and something in his weathered face hardens into resolve. The last time this village discovered an Uzumaki secret, we didn't protect it. We exploited it, feared it, and eventually let a whole nation try to erase it. I will not make that mistake with him. If you're keeping track of every hidden agenda already circling this boy before he's even old enough to understand what's happening to him, you're not wrong to feel that tension building. Danzo. The council. An eye with no name, and no records. All of it converging on a 6-year-old who just wanted to watch some festival lanterns. That's the story we're telling here, and it's only going to get bigger from this point on. Naruto wakes up in the hospital 2 days later with a headache like nothing he's ever felt and absolutely no memory of the eyes, the alley, Or the strange golden warmth that briefly filled his chest right before everything went dark? What he remembers is running. What he remembers is a scarred face and a kunai catching lantern light. What he remembers, mostly, is being afraid. Irika is the one who sits with him when he wakes, having practically demanded visitation right the moment he heard what happened, and Naruto, groggy, confused, more embarrassed than anything about fainting in front of some bullies, spends most of the visit trying to convince his teacher that he's fine, he's tough, he doesn't need anybody making a big deal out of it. He has no idea that 3 floors up, Hiruzen Sarutobi is standing over a stack of chakra skin results that make absolutely no sense according to any medical textbook in the village's archive, quietly trying to decide how much of this his 6-year-old student is ready to know. He has no idea that somewhere in Root's underground compound, whispers have already started, because Root's intelligence network is very, very good, and 3 civilians talking too loudly in a holding cell is exactly the kind of leak Danzo's people are trained to catch. And he has no idea, not even a flicker, not even a dream, that in a hidden compartment inside a modest apartment across the village, sealed inside a storage scroll his mother left behind before she died, there's a letter with his name on it that's been waiting 6 years for him to be old enough to survive reading it. He just knows his head hurts, and Irika-sensei brought him a rice cracker from the hospital cafeteria, and outside the window, Konoha is finally quiet again after the festival. For now. Because here's the thing about an eye that predates the Rinnegan, that predates the very concept of the 6 paths splitting chakra into rules and boundaries. An eye like that doesn't wake up once and go back to sleep. It doesn't work like a switch. It works like a door that's been cracked open just far enough that light is already leaking through the frame. And somewhere in Konoha, people who should never have found out this quickly are already starting to ask questions about a 6-year-old boy with whiskers on his cheeks and a bloodline that isn't supposed to exist. Next time, we find out exactly what's inside that letter Kushina left behind, and exactly how much of the truth about the Sōseigan the third Hokage is willing to risk telling a child who still doesn't fully understand why half his village hates him. Trust me, you don't want to miss it, because the scroll fragment Danzo's people intercepted? It's about to put a target on Naruto's back that has nothing to do with the 9 tails at all. The eye is gone. That's the first thing Naruto notices when he finally gets a mirror 3 days after the incident. No spiral pattern, no strange color, just his own ordinary blue eyes staring back at him, tired and a little hollow from too much hospital food and not enough real sleep. Whatever happened in that alley, it doesn't feel real to him anymore. It feels like somebody else's memory. But it was real. And in the next 20 minutes, the third Hokage is about to hand a 6-year-old boy a letter that's been waiting 6 years to be read, one that's going to turn a scary night into the first thread of the biggest secret this village has ever tried to keep. If you thought Chapter 1 was heavy, buckle in, because Chapter 2 is where the real story starts. And if you don't want to miss a single reveal, you already know what to do. Subscribe, bell on, let's go. Chapter 2, Kushina's Last Letter. Hiruzen Sarutobi has made a lot of hard calls in his life. He's sent genin to their deaths on missions he knew were dangerous because the village needed the intelligence more than it needed to protect 12-year-olds. He's signed off on operations he still thinks about at 3 in the morning, decades later, when sleep won't come. He's the kind of man who has learned, through sheer bitter repetition, that leadership mostly means choosing which version of terrible you can live with. This one is different. This one keeps him up 2 full nights in a row, sitting at his desk with a lukewarm cup of green tea going cold beside him, staring at a single storage scroll he retrieved from the deepest, most restricted vault beneath the Hokage Tower, a scroll that has exactly one instruction written on its outer seal in handwriting he'd recognize anywhere. For my son. When he's ready. Not before. Kushina Uzumaki wrote those words less than an hour before she died. Hiruzen has kept that promise for 6 years by simply not deciding when ready arrived. It was easier that way. Naruto was young. Naruto was already carrying more than any child should have to carry. And every year Hiruzen told himself there would be time later, that the boy deserved a little more childhood before the truth of his own bloodline came crashing down on him too. The alley changed that calculation. Whatever ready was supposed to mean, some part of Naruto's own body apparently decided the timeline 6 years ago, And now Hiruzen is left playing catch-up to a secret that's already started leaking out into the world whether he approves the release or not. He glances at the folder beside the scroll, the medical report from Naruto's chakra pathway scan, the eyewitness account finally extracted from the shaken, cooperative attacker now sitting in a Konoha holding cell, the 2-page memo his intelligence division put together cross-referencing every scrap of surviving Uzumaki lore the village archives still possess. It isn't much. Uzumaki was thorough about destroying its own secrets before the allied nations finished tearing the village down, a final act of clan pride, keeping their knowledge out of enemy hands even in defeat. What's left is fragments. Rumors. A single line in a 70-year-old field report describing an impossible I spotted briefly during the war, dismissed at the time as battlefield hysteria. Hiruzen has read that line 11 times now. He still doesn't know what to make of it. What he does know is this. Danzo's network moves fast, and 3 civilians who witnessed something inexplicable in a dark alley are not going to stay quiet forever, no matter how carefully Hiruzen tries to control the narrative. Root doesn't need the full truth to start circling. Root just needs a rumor with enough weight behind it, and the Uzumaki boy has an eye nobody's ever seen before is exactly the kind of rumor that gets Danzo's undivided attention. So Hiruzen makes his decision the way he makes most of his hardest ones, quietly, alone, in the dead of night, with nobody around to talk him out of it. He sends for Naruto in the morning. Naruto is discharged from the hospital with a clean bill of health and strict instructions to rest, which, if you know anything about 6-year-old Naruto Uzumaki, lasts approximately 4 hours before he's back to his usual routine of getting into trouble around the village. So when an ANBU messenger finds him mid-afternoon, perched on the roof of the general store trying to see how far he can spit a watermelon seed, it takes a genuine effort to convince him that the Hokage summoning him isn't, in fact, about the watermelon seeds. You're not in trouble, the ANBU says, for what is apparently the 3rd time, judging by the flat exhaustion in her voice. That's what people say right before you're in trouble, Naruto mutters, but he hops down anyway. Because when the Hokage calls for you personally, even a 6-year-old knows better than to keep dawdling. The walk to the tower is quiet. Naruto fidgets with the hem of his shirt, replaying the last few days in his head, trying to figure out what he could possibly be in trouble for. He remembers running. He remembers being scared. Everything after that is a blank space his mind keeps sliding right past, the way you slide past a bruise you don't want to press on. He doesn't know that he's about to meet his mother for the first time. Not in person, never in person. She's been gone since the day he was born, but through words. Through ink on a page that's been waiting for this exact afternoon for 6 long years. Hiruzen's office feels different when Naruto steps inside. Warmer somehow, despite the same stern furniture, and the same wall of framed portraits of past Hokage staring down with varying degrees of solemnity. The old man is seated behind his desk. But he's not doing paperwork. The desk is clear except for a single scroll, tied with a faded red ribbon, and 2 steaming mugs. Sit, Hiruzen says, gesturing to the chair across from him, and his voice carries none of its usual stern authority. It's gentler than Naruto's used to. That, more than anything, makes Naruto's stomach twist with nerves. Am I in trouble? He asks anyway, climbing into the chair, legs swinging well above the floor. No. Hiruzen slides one of the mugs across the desk, warm plum juice, the good kind from the shop near the academy that Naruto's mentioned liking more than once in passing, which is such a small, deliberate kindness that it almost undoes him right there. You're not in trouble, Naruto. I need to talk to you about what happened 3 nights ago. And then, I need to give you something that belongs to you. Naruto wraps both hands around the warm mug, mostly for something to hold on to. The bad guys. Did they get in trouble? For chasing me? They're being dealt with, Hiruzen says, and something in his tone makes it clear that dealt with covers a lot of ground he isn't planning to elaborate on to a 6-year-old. But that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about what happened after they cornered you. Do you remember any of it? Naruto's brow furrows, genuine confusion crossing his face. I remember running. I remember there was a wall. I remember being really, really scared, and then, he shrugs, helpless. Nothing. I woke up in the hospital. Irika-sensei said I fainted. You didn't faint, Hiruzen says slowly, watching the boy's face very carefully as he says it. Something happened to you in that alley, Naruto. Something none of us have ever seen before. The ANBU who found you saw it happen with her own eyes, and one of the men who attacked you described it in detail during questioning. What happened? Hiruzen sets down his own tea. Your eyes changed. A pattern appeared, a spiral, in a color unlike anything on record. And in that moment, the attack against you simply failed. Not because you fought back, because something stopped it from happening at all. Naruto stares at him, and for a moment the only sound in the office is the distant murmur of the village going about its ordinary afternoon far below the window. That doesn't make sense, Naruto finally says in the flat, defensive tone of a kid who has learned not to trust things that sound too strange to be true, because in his experience, strange things aimed at him are rarely good news. No, Hiruzen agrees. It doesn't. Not according to anything we currently understand about bloodline limits, and believe me, my scholars have spent the last 3 days trying. He pauses, weighing his next words with the same care he'd give a mission briefing that could get someone killed if he got it wrong. But I don't think it's as strange as it seems, Naruto. Not if you understand where it might have come from. He reaches across the desk and picks up the ribbon-tied scroll. This belonged to your mother, he says quietly. She left it for you before you were born, with instructions that you should have it when you were ready to understand it. I've been reluctant, these past 6 years, to decide when that day should be. I think 3 nights ago, that decision was made for both of us. Naruto's hands go very still around his mug. He's asked about his parents before. Of course he has, every kid asks, especially a kid who's never had either one, and the answers he's gotten over the years have always been vague, careful, deliberately incomplete. Your father was a hero. Your mother loved you very much. You'll understand more when you're older. He's learned to stop pushing, mostly, because pushing never seemed to get him anywhere except more careful silences. And now there's a scroll sitting on the Hokage's desk with his mother's handwriting on it, and Naruto realizes, with a sudden fierce ache in his chest, that he's more afraid of this than he was of the men in the alley. Is it? His voice comes out smaller than he means it to. Is it bad? What it says? Hiruzen's expression softens in a way Naruto has genuinely never seen on the old man's face before. No, Naruto. I think it might be one of the kindest things anyone will ever give you. He holds the scroll out across the desk. But that's not for me to say. It's hers to tell you. Take your time. I'll be right here. Naruto takes the scroll with both hands, like it might shatter, and for a long moment he just holds it, staring at the faded red ribbon, at handwriting that belongs to a woman he has no memory of at all. Then, slowly, carefully, he pulls the ribbon loose. My beautiful boy, if you're reading this, it means Hiruzen finally decided you were ready, which, knowing that stubborn old man, probably took longer than it should have. Don't be too hard on him. He's carrying a lot, and I trust him with you more than I'd trust almost anyone else in this world. I don't know how old you are right now. I don't know what you look like, whether you've got your father's calm or my temper, whether you're tall or short or loud or quiet. I don't know if you're happy. That's the part that hurts the most, writing this, not knowing, and never getting to find out for myself. I'm so sorry for that, Naruto. I'm so sorry I won't be there, but I need you to know something, and I need you to know it clearly, because it's going to matter more than almost anything else I could possibly tell you. You come from a clan that the rest of the world was afraid of, not because we were cruel. Not because we sought power for its own sake. Uzumaki, our home, before it was destroyed, was built on something the other great villages never understood, and honestly, never really tried to. We didn't chase strength for the sake of conquest. We were keepers. Healers. Binders of things that break. Our seals held back disasters other villages caused. Our chains restrained monsters other villages couldn't. And in the deepest heart of our clan, hidden and rarely spoken of even among our own people, there was a bloodline gift older than almost anything else in the shinobi world. Older, the elders used to whisper, than the very division of chakra into paths and natures that every other dojutsu draws from. We called it the Sōseigan. The Genesis I never awakened it myself, Naruto. Neither did my mother, nor hers before her. It doesn't pass down the way other bloodlines do, not guaranteed, not predictable. The elders always said it chooses, that it waits, sometimes for generations, for an Uzumaki who has been pushed right up against the edge of losing everything and chooses, in that single terrible moment, to hold on to life instead of letting go. I don't know if that's true. I never got to ask anyone who'd truly seen it. By the time I was old enough to care about clan history, there was almost no clan left to teach it to me, just fragments. Old stories passed down by the handful of us who survived what happened to Uzumaki. But I believed it, Naruto. I believed it the way you believe the things that get you through the hardest nights. Because the alternative, that our clan was destroyed and took every scrap of what made us special down with it, was too painful to accept. If you are reading this letter because that I has already found you, then I need you to hear this clearly. It is not a curse. It is not something to be afraid of, and it is not something anyone gets to take from you, no matter how strange or dangerous they decide it looks from the outside. It is the truest expression of what our clan always believed in, that life, protected and nurtured and fought for, is worth more than any weapon built to end it. The Sage of Six Paths split chakra into 6 natures and 6 paths of power, and every Dōjutsu the world has built since then, the Sharingan, the Byakugan, and whatever monstrous thing the Rinnegan becomes in the wrong hands, draws its strength from that division. From control. From dominance over one aspect or another of what he left behind. Our clan's gift comes from somewhere else entirely. It comes from before the division, from the raw, whole, undivided will to simply keep living, keep growing, keep protecting the people and the world around you no matter how many times it tries to break you down. That's not something the sage gave the world. That's something the Uzumaki clan carried long before he ever split anything at all. I won't lie to you and tell you it will be easy. Power like this draws attention, and not always the kind you want. There will be people, inside your own village, maybe, not just outside it, who look at what you carry and see a tool instead of a person. I need you to be careful. I need you to trust Hiruzen, and Kakashi if he's still watching over you the way I asked him to, and anyone else who proves through their actions, not just their words, that they see you and not just what you're capable of. But more than anything, Naruto, I need you to trust yourself. Whatever that I asks of you, and I suspect, in time, it will ask a great deal, I believe with everything I am that you will meet it with the same stubborn, ridiculous, wonderful heart I already love so much, even though I've never gotten the chance to see it in person. You are not what happened to our clan. You are what survives it. I love you more than any letter could ever say. Grow up strong. Grow up kind. And please, for me, grow up happy even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. All my love, always, your mother. Naruto reads the letter 3 times before he trusts his voice enough to speak, and even then, all that comes out is a small, wet oh. Hiruzen doesn't say anything. He's watched a lot of people read a lot of difficult things in this office over the decades, and he's learned that the kindest thing he can offer, most of the time, is silence and patience in equal measure. He simply sits, and waits, and lets the boy across from him have this moment without an audience pressing in on it. Naruto wipes his face with the back of his sleeve, embarrassed, though there's nobody here to be embarrassed in front of except an old man who's clearly seen plenty of children cry in this exact chair before. His voice cracks. He tries again. She knew? She knew this might happen to me? Before I was even born? She hoped it might, Hiruzen says gently. Whether she knew for certain, I can't say. Your mother knew far more about her clan's history than most people gave her credit for. Konoha never fully understood what it lost when Uzumaki fell, Naruto. I don't think we understand it even now. Naruto looks down at the letter again, at his mother's handwriting, at words like I love you more than any letter could ever say that he's going to read again 100 more times over the coming weeks until the paper starts to soften at the folds. The eye, he says slowly. The Sōseigan. Is it gonna happen again? Am I gonna just, I dunno, randomly turn it on in the middle of class or something? I don't know, Hiruzen admits, and there's an honesty in his voice that Naruto appreciates more than he could put into words. This is uncharted territory for both of us. What I can tell you is that we're going to figure it out together, carefully, and quietly. This is not something I intend to announce to the village council, or to anyone outside this room, until we understand it far better than we do right now. Why? Naruto asks, and it's a fair question. If it's a good thing, like Mom said. Why keep it secret? Hiruzen's expression turns grave in a way that makes Naruto sit up a little straighter. Because there are people in this village, Naruto, who would look at what your mother described in that letter and see only one thing, a weapon. A weapon they'd want to control, to shape, to use however serves their own goals, without a single thought spared for the boy carrying it. He lets that sink in for a moment. Your mother asked you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust me in return, right now, when I tell you that the safest thing for you, for a long while yet, is for this to remain between us, and the handful of people I choose very carefully to bring into that trust. Naruto thinks about the men in the alley. About Iruka's carefully patient smiles, and the ANBU escorts he's had for as long as he can remember, and the whispers that follow him through the market that he's never quite been able to make out but has always understood, on some level, weren't kind. He thinks about a village that spent his whole life looking at him like he's something to be afraid of, and how much worse that might get if they decided he was something to be used instead. Okay, he says quietly. I'll keep it secret. Thank you, Hiruzen says, and means it. There's one more thing, Naruto, and I want you to listen carefully, because it's important. He leans forward slightly. I'd like to arrange for you to begin training, not with the academy instructors, not yet, but privately, with someone who might help you understand what's happening to you when it happens. Someone who won't report it to anyone but me. Like Iruka-sensei? No. Someone else. I'll tell you more once the arrangements are made. For now, I need you to promise me something else. If you feel that heat again, that strange pressure your mother's letter describes, I need you to come straight to me or to whichever ANBU is nearby. Don't try to hide it. Don't try to fight it alone. Can you promise me that? Naruto nods, still clutching the letter against his chest like it might slip away from him if he loosens his grip even slightly. I promise. Here's where things get complicated, and I promise you, this is the part that's going to set the whole rest of this series in motion. Because while Naruto is sitting in that office finally learning the truth about his own bloodline, somewhere else in the village, a very different kind of meeting is already underway. And it involves someone who was never supposed to get even a fragment of what just happened in that alley. Let's rewind, just slightly, to earlier that same morning. Danzo Shimura's underground compound doesn't have windows, doesn't have festival lanterns, doesn't have any of the warmth that Hiruzen's office carries even in its most serious moments. It has cold stone corridors and masked operatives who move without sound and a single man at the center of it all who has spent decades convinced that Konoha's survival depends on strength the rest of the village is too soft-hearted to pursue. The report on his desk is thin, 3 paragraphs, cobbled together from a root operative's overheard conversation between 2 off-duty medical staff at the hospital, plus a second-hand account from the holding cell guard who processed the 3 men arrested 3 nights prior. It isn't much. But Danzo has built an entire career out of doing a great deal with very little, and what these 3 paragraphs describe is more than enough to seize his full attention. An unrecorded Dōjutsu. Spiral pattern, unknown coloration. Manifested in the Jinchuriki during a life-threatening encounter. Effect, neutralized an incoming physical attack through means the attacker could not explain. Danzo reads it twice, his single visible eye narrowing with the particular, focused intensity of a man recalculating every plan he's ever made around a new and unexpected variable. He has spent years quietly cataloging the Ninetales Jinchuriki's potential value to the village, has argued, more than once and always unsuccessfully, that the boy should be raised under Root's more disciplined, more controlled methods rather than left to grow up soft and unguided under Hiruzen's overly sentimental watch. He has always seen Naruto as an asset first. A weapon Konoha cannot afford to squander through misplaced kindness. This report changes the shape of that asset considerably. An Uzumaki bloodline limit, dormant for generations, awakening now, in this specific vessel. It isn't hard for a man like Danzo to connect that to the old rumors he's spent decades quietly collecting about Uzumaki true strength, the reason 3 allied nations felt the need to destroy that village rather than simply defeat it in open war. If there's truth to those old whispers, if this eye is even a fraction as significant as it sounds from 3 second-hand paragraphs. Fu, he says, and one of his masked operatives materializes silently at his side. I want everything we have on Uzumaki fall. Every surviving fragment, Every interrogation record from the war, every piece of intelligence our predecessors gathered on Uzumaki clan capabilities before the village was destroyed. I don't care how old or how unreliable it is. I want it on my desk by tomorrow morning. Understood? And I want eyes on the Uzumaki boy. Discreet. Nothing that draws Sarutobi's attention. He's already sentimental enough about that child to make this difficult if he suspects Root's involvement. Danzo's fingers steeple in front of him, the closest thing to genuine anticipation his weathered face ever betrays. If what this report describes is even partially accurate, that boy may be carrying something far more valuable to this village's future than the Nine Tails alone ever was. The operative bows and vanishes. Danzo remains alone in the cold quiet of his office, staring down at 3 thin paragraphs that have just quietly, irrevocably, put a target on a 6-year-old's back, a target that has nothing to do with the fox sealed inside him, and everything to do with an eye that isn't supposed to exist yet, one that a grieving mother once believed would only ever be a gift. Danzo doesn't see gifts. He never has. He sees resources. And resources, in his experience, are meant to be used. Back in the Hokage's office, Naruto is carefully rolling his mother's letter back into its scroll, handling it with the kind of reverent care most 6-year-olds reserve for absolutely nothing, tucking it against his chest like he's afraid letting it out of arm's reach even for a second might undo the whole afternoon. Can I? He starts, then stops, uncertain. Can I keep it? The letter? It's yours, Hiruzen says. It was always yours. I only kept it safe until you were ready. Naruto nods, blinking hard against another threatening wave of tears, and for a moment, sitting there in that big chair with a scroll clutched to his chest and warm plum juice going cold beside him, he looks less like the loud, mischievous troublemaker most of the village has already written him off as, and more like exactly what he actually is, a small boy who just learned, for the very first time, that somebody loved him enough to leave behind proof of it. Hokage Gigi, he says quietly, using the nickname he's used since he was old enough to talk, do you think she'd be proud of me? Even though I don't really understand any of this yet? Hiruzen's chest tightens in a way that has nothing to do with his age and everything to do with 6 years of watching this particular boy grow up largely alone, and he answers without a single moment of hesitation. I think she already is, Naruto. And I think she'd be even prouder of everything you're about to become. Naruto smiles. A small, wobbly, genuine smile. And for just a moment, in that quiet office high above a village that has no idea what it's raising, everything feels almost peaceful. It won't stay that way for long, because 3 streets over, in a cold stone room with no windows, a very dangerous man has already started pulling old, forbidden intelligence files out of long-sealed archives, preparing to learn everything the Shinobi world once feared about the Uzumaki clan's true potential. And he isn't planning to wait for Hiruzen's permission to act on whatever he finds. You ever notice how the calm always comes right before the storm in stories like this? For the last few weeks, Naruto's life has looked almost normal. Academy classes, ramen after school, the occasional prank on unsuspecting shopkeepers. But normal was never going to last. Not for a boy carrying a bloodline nobody in this village even has a name for yet outside one very small circle. Today, that circle is about to grow by exactly one person, and she's about to become the most important teacher Naruto's ever had. More important than Irika. Maybe even more important than the sensei you're all expecting to show up eventually. Stick with me, because by the end of this chapter, you're going to meet the last piece of Uzushiobikure still walking this earth. Subscribe now if you don't want to miss it. Let's get into Chapter 3. Chapter 3. A teacher who isn't Jiraiya. 3 weeks pass after that afternoon in the Hokage's office. And on the surface, nothing about Naruto's life looks any different at all. He still shows up late to Irika-sensei's class, still gets scolded for doodling on his worksheets instead of practicing hand seals, still spends his afternoons alone more often than not, kicking pebbles down empty streets on his way back to an apartment that's always a little too quiet for a 6-year-old to be living in by himself. If you didn't know better, you'd assume the alley, the letter, the eye, all of it had simply been a strange, isolated blip in an otherwise unremarkable childhood. But you'd be wrong. Because underneath that surface, something in Naruto has fundamentally shifted, and it's the kind of shift that doesn't show up in report cards or academy scores. It shows up in small, quiet moments that nobody except Naruto himself really notices. Like the afternoon, about a week after reading his mother's letter, when a group of older kids corner him behind the academy building. Nothing serious, just the usual shoving and name-calling routine Naruto's dealt with more times than he can count, and for just a fraction of a second, right as one of them raises a fist, Naruto feels that same strange heat flicker behind his eyes. A warning. A door creaking open just slightly before slamming shut again. He doesn't let it out. He remembers his promise to Hiruzen. Don't try to fight it alone, and instead of standing his ground the way some hidden instinct wants him to, he turns and runs, the way he always has, leaving the older kids laughing behind him and his own heart hammering with something that isn't quite fear anymore. It's harder than it sounds, walking away from a fight when part of you now knows, on some bone-deep level, that you might not actually lose it. He tells Hiruzen about it that same evening, exactly like he promised. The old Hokage listens carefully, asks careful questions, writes careful notes, and privately, in the quiet of his own office afterward, allows himself a small, worried sigh, because 3 weeks in, it's becoming clear that this eye isn't going to stay dormant just because everyone involved would prefer a little more time to prepare. He needs to find Naruto's teacher. And he needs to find her soon. Here's the problem. The woman Hiruzen has in mind doesn't want to be found. Her name is Toki Uzumaki, and if you asked most people in Konoha, even most shinobi, they tell you with complete confidence that there are no full-blooded Uzumaki left in the world besides Naruto himself. That's not quite true. It's just true enough that Toki has spent the better part of 3 decades making absolutely sure it stays that way. She was 17 when Uzumaki fell, not a shinobi herself, more of a support corps medic in training, which is likely the only reason she survived at all while so many of the village's actual combat forces didn't. She remembers the sky that day with a clarity that never fades no matter how many years pass, remembers the smoke, the sound, the particular silence that falls over a place after it stops being a home and starts being a memory. She remembers running with a handful of other survivors, scattering in every direction because staying together made them easier to hunt, and she remembers making a promise to herself somewhere in that chaos that she would never again let herself become valuable enough to anyone that they'd come looking for her. For 30 years, that promise has held. She lives in a modest, isolated house at the edge of a small forested valley 2 days' travel from Konoha's main gates, technically within the Land of Fire, technically under Konoha's jurisdiction, but far enough off the beaten path that most travelers don't even know the house exists. She grows her own vegetables. She fishes the stream that runs behind her property. She keeps to herself, and in 30 years she's built a quiet, careful life entirely free of the kind of attention that got her entire home destroyed once already. Hiruzen has known about her for nearly 2 decades, one of a small handful of surviving Uzumaki refugees his intelligence network quietly tracked down in the chaotic years after the war. Information he's always kept sealed away rather than acted on, out of respect for a woman who made it very clear, the one time he reached out to her personally, that she wanted nothing to do with Konoha or any other hidden village ever again. He hasn't spoken to her in 12 years. Showing up at her door now, asking her to break 3 decades of careful anonymity for the sake of a boy she's never met, is not a conversation he's looking forward to. He goes anyway. Some things matter more than comfort. The journey takes 2 days, and Hiruzen makes it alone, without escort, dressed in plain traveling clothes rather than his ceremonial robes, a small courtesy, an acknowledgement that he's coming to her not as the Hokage making a demand, but as an old man asking an old friend for help. Toki's house sits at the edge of a clearing, modest and well-kept, smoke curling gently from a stone chimney. When Hiruzen steps into the clearing, she's already standing on the porch waiting for him, arms crossed, dressed simply in a long, dark green robe with sleeves that fall well past her wrists, and a high collar that covers her throat. Practical clothing for a woman who's spent 30 years valuing function and modesty over anything, resembling shinobi fashion. Her gray-streaked red hair, the one unmistakable trace of her clan she's never quite managed to hide, is pulled back in a tight, practical braid. She doesn't look surprised to see him. She looks, if anything, resigned, like she's been half expecting this visit for longer than either of them would like to admit. Hiruzen. Her voice is flat, cautious. It's been 12 years. I assume you're not here for the scenery, Toki. He inclines his head respectfully. I wouldn't have come if it weren't important. It's always important. She doesn't move from the porch, doesn't invite him in yet, watching him with the wary stillness of someone who has trained herself, over decades, to treat every unexpected visitor as a potential threat. Say what you came to say. Hiruzen doesn't waste time with pleasantries she clearly has no interest in. Kushina's son. He's awakened the Sōseigan. For a long moment, Toki doesn't respond at all. Something flickers behind her eyes, shock, grief, maybe both at once, and when she finally speaks, her voice has lost some of its earlier flatness. That's not possible, she says, though there's no real conviction behind the words, just the automatic disbelief of someone who's spent 30 years assuming a piece of her clan's history died with everyone who might have carried it. The eye hasn't manifested in generations, Hiruzen. Not since, she stops herself. Not since who? Hiruzen asks gently. Toki's jaw tightens. That's not a story for the middle of my front yard. She finally steps aside, gesturing toward the open door behind her with visible reluctance. Come in. I suppose you're not leaving until I hear the rest of this anyway. Inside, Toki's home is exactly what you'd expect from someone who's spent 30 years building a life designed to attract as little attention as possible. Sparse, functional, clean. A small kitchen. A modest sitting room with a low table and floor cushions. On one wall, almost hidden in a shadowed corner, hangs a single faded tapestry bearing the unmistakable spiral crest of Uzumaki, the only visible trace in the entire house that its owner comes from anywhere at all. Toki sets a kettle on the stove. Plain barley tea, nothing stronger, the only kind of drink she's ever kept in her cupboard, and settles across from Hiruzen at the low table with the careful, deliberate movements of someone buying herself time to think. Tell me everything, she says finally. From the beginning. Don't leave anything out. Hiruzen does. The alley, the attackers, the ANBU medic's report, Kushina's letter, the eyewitness account, every detail he's gathered over the past 3 weeks. Toki listens without interrupting, her expression carefully controlled, though Hiruzen, who has known her long enough to read past that control, can see the toll each new detail takes on her. When he finishes, she's quiet for a long moment, staring down at the untouched cup of tea in front of her. My grandmother used to tell stories about it, she says finally, voice quieter now. The Sōseigan. Most of the clan treated it like a myth by the time I was old enough to understand what she was talking about, something whispered about in old texts nobody could fully translate anymore. Half of our written history lost long before I was born, buried under generations of wars that picked our clan apart piece by piece. She wraps both hands around her cup, more for warmth than any intention of drinking. But my grandmother believed in it completely. She used to say the I only chose Uzumaki who had already lost everything and refused to stop living anyway. She used to say it was the truest test of what made someone worthy of the clan name. Not bloodline purity, not raw chakra reserves, but sheer stubborn will. Did you ever see it manifest? Hiruzen asks. In your lifetime, before the fall? Toki shakes her head slowly. Once. Not fully, just a flicker, in an elder named Keiru, during the worst days of the siege, right before Uzumaki finally fell. I was 17. I barely understood what I was looking at. I remember his eyes changed color, and I remember the wall of an entire building that had started collapsing on a group of fleeing children simply stopped, held itself together for exactly as long as it took them to get clear, and then came down anyway, like it had only ever been buying time. Her voice goes distant, lost somewhere in 30-year-old memory. Keiru died 2 days later. Chakra exhaustion, they said, though I've always suspected it was something more than that. The eye takes a toll most bodies aren't built to survive using more than once or twice. Hiruzen's expression darkens with genuine concern. Is that a risk for Naruto? Could using it kill him, without proper training? Without understanding how to manage what it costs him? Toki meets his eyes directly for the first time since he arrived. Yes. Absolutely. That eye doesn't create something from nothing, Hiruzen. Nothing in this world works that way, not even Uzumaki bloodlines. It borrows. It borrows life force, vitality, the very thing that keeps a body running, and if a child doesn't learn to control exactly how much he's borrowing and from where, it will burn through him like a candle lit at both ends. The room goes quiet except for the soft hiss of the kettle cooling on the stove. That's why I've come to you, Hiruzen says finally. You're the last person alive who carries any real memory of what our clan once understood about this bloodline. I need someone to teach him, not combat technique, not academy fundamentals, but the foundation your grandmother's generation understood and mine never had the chance to learn. I wouldn't ask if I had any other option, Toki. I know what I'm asking you to give up. Toki is quiet for a long time, staring into her tea, and when she finally speaks, there's an old, tired grief in her voice that makes it clear exactly how much this decision costs her before she's even made it. I swore I'd never let myself matter to anyone important again, she says quietly. It's how I survived. It's how I've stayed safe for 30 years, while everyone I ever loved as a girl either died the day our village fell or scattered so completely I've never found a trace of them since. She looks up, and there's something fierce and sad and resolved all at once in her expression. But I also swore, the night I watched Yuzushiogakure burn, that if I ever had the chance to keep even one more piece of what we were from disappearing entirely, I wouldn't waste it out of fear. She sets down her cup. Bring him to me, she says. Quietly. No escorts who might talk, no official records that put his name anywhere near mine. If Kushina's son is carrying what's left of our clan's true legacy, then he deserves to learn it properly. And he deserves to learn it from someone who actually understands what it cost the people who carried it before him. Hiruzen bows his head, genuine relief and gratitude written plainly across his weathered face. Thank you, Toki. I mean that. Don't thank me yet, she says, standing to see him out, old weariness settling back over her features like a familiar coat. You're about to find out I'm a much harder teacher than whatever image you've built up of a sweet old grandmother in your head. And Hiruzen, she pauses at the door, voice dropping lower, more serious. If anyone outside the two of us learns his name is connected to mine, I want you to understand something clearly. I will disappear again. And this time, I won't leave a trail for you to follow. Understood, Hiruzen says. And he means that too. 2 weeks later, on a quiet weekend morning when the academy is closed and nobody will notice a 6-year-old missing from his usual haunts around the village, Hiruzen brings Naruto to meet his new teacher. The trip is arranged carefully, a cover story about visiting a distant relative for a few days, a small overnight bag Naruto packs with the careful excitement of a kid who's never really been anywhere outside the village before, and a route through the forest that avoids any of the main travel roads where curious eyes might notice a pattern worth reporting. Naruto talks the entire way there. Nerves, mostly, dressed up as excitement, questions about who this person is, what she's like, whether she's scary, whether she's going to teach him cool ninja stuff, and Hiruzen answers what he can, careful not to give away too much, wanting Toki to have the chance to introduce herself on her own terms. When they finally step into the clearing and Naruto sees the modest house with smoke curling from its chimney, he goes uncharacteristically quiet, some instinct telling him this moment matters more than the ordinary visits and errands that usually fill his days. Toki is waiting on the porch again, same wary stillness as before, watching the small blonde boy approaching beside the Hokage with an expression that's harder to read than her earlier reception of Hiruzen, alone. She's traded her dark green robe for a simpler, practical outfit today, long sleeves, a high collar, loose pants tucked into sturdy sandals, the clothing of a woman who spends her days doing physical work and has no interest in anything more decorative than that. Naruto stops a few feet from the porch, suddenly shy in a way that doesn't show up often, staring up at this stranger with wide blue eyes. Hi, he manages. I'm Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. Something shifts in Toki's expression at the sound of that name spoken aloud by its owner for the first time in her presence. Something that isn't quite a smile, but isn't far from one either. I know who you are, she says, quieter than her earlier conversation with Hiruzen, and there's an unmistakable gentleness underneath the roughness of her voice now. You have your mother's eyes. Did you know that? The shape of them, I mean. Not the color. She studies him a moment longer, something wistful passing behind her own gaze. I knew Kushina, a long time ago. Before either of us really understood what we'd lost. Naruto's breath catches. You knew my mom? Not well. We were young, and the world was already falling apart around us by the time we crossed paths. Toki finally allows herself a small, tired smile. But I remember her temper. And her stubbornness. It looks like you inherited both. Naruto laughs, a small, surprised, genuinely delighted sound, and just like that, some of the tension in the clearing eases. My name is Toki, she continues, stepping down off the porch to properly meet him at eye level, crouching slightly the way an adult does for a much younger child. Toki Uzumaki. That makes us family, in a way, the only family either of us has left carrying this name. I'd like to teach you what I know about where we come from, and about the eye that's woken up inside you. Would you like that? Naruto nods so hard it looks like it might hurt his neck. Yeah. Yes. Please, good. Toki straightens, glancing briefly at Hiruzen with a look that carries decades of complicated history in it before turning her full attention back to the boy in front of her. Then let's get started. Say goodbye to the Hokage. He has a village to run, and you and I have a great deal of work ahead of us. If you thought this was going to be the part where Naruto starts throwing chakra-infused chains around and blasting through training dummies on day one, I need you to reset those expectations right now, because Toki's first lesson isn't anything like what Naruto's expecting, and honestly, it isn't anything like what most of you watching are expecting either. This is where the Sōseigan starts to separate itself from every other dojutsu in the series, and it starts with something Naruto's never once been asked to do in his entire life. Sit still. Sit, Toki instructs, gesturing to a cushion across from her own on the small porch overlooking the clearing, once Hiruzen has departed back toward the village with a promise to return in 3 days' time. Cross your legs. Hands resting on your knees. Back straight, but not stiff. Naruto does as he's told, though he's practically vibrating with barely contained energy, glancing around like he's expecting training equipment, or targets, or something resembling the shinobi training he's occasionally glimpsed older academy students practicing. So, what are we gonna do first? Throwing stuff? Chakra exercises? I know some hand seals already. Irika-sensei taught us the transformation jutsu. I'm not very good at it yet, but we're going to sit, Toki says simply. Naruto blinks. Sit, she confirms, settling onto her own cushion with the easy, practiced posture of someone who's done this 1,000 times before. And breathe. And be quiet, which I suspect is going to be the hardest part of this entire lesson for you. Naruto's face falls with such theatrical disappointment that Toki has to fight to keep her expression stern. That's not training. That's just sitting there. Every other dojutsu in this world, Toki says, ignoring his protest entirely, draws its strength from control. From narrowing focus down onto a single target, a single technique, a single outcome you're trying to force into existence. The Sharingan reads an opponent's movement, and predicts what comes next. The Byakugan sees through walls and flesh to find precise, vulnerable points. Even the Rinnegan, for all its terrible power, works by commanding 6 paths, 6 functions, each one a tool wielded by a will that's decided exactly what it wants to happen. She leans forward slightly, meeting Naruto's eyes with an intensity that makes him sit up a little straighter despite himself. The Sōseigan doesn't work that way. It never has. It doesn't respond to force, or focus, or desperate demanding. It responds to stillness, to a mind quiet enough, and a heart honest enough, that it can recognize what should exist without you trying to force it there. Every Uzumaki who ever truly mastered this eye, according to what little history survives, started exactly where you're starting now. Sitting. Breathing. Learning to listen to something inside themselves they'd spent their whole lives too busy, or too scared, to actually hear. Naruto stares at her, some of his earlier impatience fading into genuine, thoughtful confusion. I don't really get it. You will, Toki says, not unkindly. Or you won't, and we'll figure out a different way. But this is where we start, because I refuse to teach you techniques you're not ready to survive using. You already borrowed against your own body once, in that alley, without understanding what you were spending. I won't let that happen again if I can help it. Her voice softens slightly. Close your eyes, Naruto. Breathe in slow. Count to 4. Hold it. Let it out slow, count to 4 again. That's all I want from you right now. Nothing more. Naruto hesitates a moment longer, then closes his eyes, and does exactly as he's told, though his shoulders stay tense with the effort of holding still for longer than he's used to. They sit like that for a long time, longer than Naruto's ever managed to stay still for anything in his entire life, if you don't count sleeping, and though nothing visibly happens, no spiral pattern, no flare of chakra, no dramatic breakthrough, Toki watches him carefully the entire time, noting the small shifts in his breathing, the moments his concentration slips and the moments it holds. It's not a flashy first lesson. It's not the kind of scene you'd expect to open a training montage, but it's exactly the kind of foundation this bloodline actually requires. And Toki knows, better than anyone else alive, that skipping past it in favor of something more exciting would be exactly the mistake that got an elder named Keira killed 30 years ago. By the end of that first day, Naruto hasn't activated the Sōseigan even once. He's frustrated about it, in the particular loud, dramatic way 6-year-olds get frustrated about anything that doesn't come easily, flopping backward onto the porch with an exaggerated groan the moment Toki finally calls an end to the day's meditation. This is impossible, he complains to the darkening sky above him. I sat there for hours and nothing happened. Maybe I imagined the whole thing. Maybe it was just, I dunno, a weird dream or something. It wasn't a dream, Toki says, unbothered by his dramatics, already moving toward the kitchen to start preparing dinner. A simple grilled fish over rice, nothing elaborate, but more food than Naruto's used to eating in one sitting back in his own quiet apartment. And you didn't fail today, Naruto, even though it feels that way to you. You sat still for nearly 40 minutes by the end. When we started, you managed barely to. Naruto sits up, surprised. Really? Really? Toki glances back at him, something almost fond in her expression despite her usual guardedness. This eye isn't going anywhere. It's part of you now, whether you understand it yet or not. We have time to build this properly, one small piece at a time. There's no need to rush towards something you're not ready to survive. Naruto's quiet for a moment, watching her move around the small kitchen with the same simple, careful competence she brings to everything else. Can I ask you something? You can ask. Why are you doing this? Teaching me, I mean. You don't even know me. You said yourself you didn't want to matter to anyone again. He fidgets with the edge of his sleeve, working up the nerve for the rest of the question. Aren't you scared? Of people finding out? Of it happening again? What happened to your village? Toki goes still for a moment, hands pausing over the small grill. When she finally answers, her voice carries a weight that makes Naruto realize, for the first time, exactly how much this arrangement is costing the woman standing in front of him. Yes, she says simply. I'm terrified. Every single day since Hiruzen showed up on my porch, I've been terrified. She turns to look at him directly. But I've spent 30 years alone, Naruto, hiding a piece of history that mattered more than almost anything else in this world, and I've spent 30 years telling myself that keeping it hidden was the same thing as keeping it safe. Her expression softens into something sadder, older. It isn't. A thing you hide away forever, out of fear, eventually just disappears anyway. Quietly. Without anyone even noticing it's gone, she turns back to the grill, voice steadying. You're not just some boy I happened to meet, Naruto. You're proof that our clan didn't end the day Uzumaki fell. Teaching you what I know isn't a burden I'm reluctantly agreeing to carry. It's the first thing in 30 years that's actually felt like it matters. Naruto doesn't fully understand everything she's saying, not at 6 years old, but he understands the feeling underneath it well enough. The particular loneliness of carrying something important all by yourself for far too long. And something in his chest aches with a recognition that surprises him. I'll try harder tomorrow, he says quietly. The sitting still thing. I'll get better at it. I promise. Toki's mouth curves into her first real, unguarded smile since he arrived. I know you will. Now here's where things take a turn, because while Naruto and Toki are sharing that first quiet dinner together, a small, ordinary moment that neither of them fully realizes yet is the beginning of something that's going to reshape both their lives. Somebody else has already found the edge of that clearing, and they are absolutely not there to share a meal. 200 meters into the tree line surrounding Toki's property, a root operative crouches motionless in the deep shadow of an old cedar, mask blank and expressionless, watching the small house through a narrow gap in the branches with the patient, unblinking focus of someone trained to remain perfectly still for hours at a time without complaint. It hadn't been difficult to track the Hokage's movements once Danzo's orders came down. A man of Hiruzen's stature doesn't travel completely unnoticed no matter how carefully he tries, not when Root has ears in every corner of the village worth having ears in. A stable hand who noticed the Hokage requesting a horse for personal travel rather than official business. A gate guard who logged an unregistered exit 2 days past. A careful, patient trail of small details that most people would never think twice about, but that Root's intelligence division has spent years learning to stitch together into something meaningful. It had taken 3 days to identify the destination. It had taken 1 more to confirm exactly who lived in the small, isolated house at the end of it. The operative watches Naruto through the gap in the branches, watches him laugh at something the old woman says, watches the two of them eat together with an ease that looks, disturbingly, like actual family, and files every detail away with cold, professional thoroughness before finally, silently, melting back into the deeper darkness of the forest to report what they've found. Root doesn't move quickly. Root moves carefully, gathering, watching, waiting for the precise moment when action will yield the maximum result with the minimum risk. But make no mistake, the moment this report reaches Danzo's desk, the quiet, fragile peace of that small clearing is going to start running on borrowed time. And neither Naruto nor Toki have the faintest idea they're already being watched. Last time, we left Toki's clearing looking peaceful, a boy and his teacher sharing a quiet dinner, a small found family moment neither of them expected. But 200 meters into the tree line, a masked figure was already watching, already reporting back to a man who doesn't believe in gifts, only resources. Today, that quiet peace runs out. Today, Root makes its first move, and it's about to teach both Naruto and Toki exactly how dangerous it is to matter to the wrong people. This one gets intense, so stick around to the end, and if you're not subscribed yet, now's a very good time to fix that. Let's get into Chapter 4. Chapter 4, Shadows in the Clearing. 6 days pass after that first Root operative melts back into the tree line, and for 6 days, absolutely nothing happens. That's not an accident. That's Danzo. A lesser intelligence operation might have moved immediately, snatched the boy the moment his location was confirmed, weighed the political fallout later. Danzo Shimura has built Root on the opposite philosophy entirely. Patience is a weapon. And the operatives who survive longest under his command are the ones who understand that rushing a valuable target is how you lose it permanently. So for 6 days, Root simply watches. They map the clearing's approach routes. They log Hiruzen's travel pattern, 3-day intervals, unescorted, predictable enough to plan around. They note the old woman's habits, her modest defenses, the fact that she never leaves the boy alone even for a moment when he's in her care. And they wait for the one window that matters most, the moment when Hiruzen isn't there to complicate things. That window opens on the 7th day. Naruto has gotten better at sitting still. Not good, he's still a 6-year-old with the attention span of a caffeinated squirrel, and Toki still has to remind him at least twice a session to stop fidgeting, but better. On this particular morning, cross-legged on the porch with his eyes closed, and his breathing slow and even, something happens that hasn't happened in any of their sessions before. A flicker. Not the full spiral, not the violet-red intensity Toki remembers from her grandmother's stories, just the faintest ghost of a pattern at the edges of his closed eyelids, gone again almost before it starts, like a candle flame catching for half a second in a draft before guttering back out. Toki's eyes snap open. Naruto. Stop. Open your eyes slowly. He does, blinking against the morning light. Immediately anxious. Did I do something wrong? No. Toki leans forward, studying his face with careful intensity. No, you didn't do anything wrong at all. Tell me what you were thinking about, right before you felt anything change. Naruto frowns, trying to remember. I dunno. I was just breathing, like you said. And then I started thinking about the letter. About Mom. About how she said she believed in me even though she never got to meet me. His frown deepens. Is that bad? I thought I was supposed to keep my mind empty. No, Toki says again, softer this time, something like wonder creeping into her voice. That's not bad at all. That might be exactly right. She sits back, processing. The old stories always said the eye responds to will, not force, not command, but honest, unguarded intention. You weren't trying to make anything happen. You were just feeling something true, and it answered. Naruto's face lights up despite himself. So I did it? For real? A flicker. The very beginning of a door opening. Toki allows herself a small, proud smile, an expression that still sits a little unfamiliar on her weathered face, like a muscle she hasn't used in decades finally starting to remember its shape. That's more progress in 1 week than I dared hope for. We'll keep building from here slowly. No rushing. Naruto practically vibrates with excitement, already opening his mouth to ask a dozen follow-up questions, when Toki's entire posture changes. It happens fast. 1 second she's relaxed, warm, present with her student, and the next she's gone rigid, head tilted slightly. Every sense she still has after 30 years of careful vigilance suddenly locked onto the treeline at the edge of the clearing. Toki? Naruto's voice goes small. What's wrong? Inside, she says, voice dropping into a flat, controlled register Naruto's never heard from her before. Now. Don't argue. He doesn't argue. Something in her tone makes it very clear this isn't the moment for questions. Toki has spent 30 years half expecting this exact moment, and even so, when it actually arrives, her heart hammers against her ribs with a fear so old and familiar it feels like slipping back into a coat she thought she'd finally outgrown. 4 chakra signatures. Spread wide around the clearing's perimeter, moving with the precise, coordinated silence of trained shinobi rather than the clumsy approach of bandits or opportunists. Whoever sent them didn't send amateurs. She hustles Naruto through the door, snatches the small emergency kit she's kept ready by the entrance for 30 years without ever once needing it, and presses a small, worn paper seal into his hand. One she inscribed herself, years ago, in the careful, precise Fuinjutsu style every Uzumaki child learns before almost anything else. Listen to me very carefully, she says, crouching to his eye level, voice steady despite the fear plainly visible in her eyes. This seal calls for help. Real help, Hokage-level help. I need you to activate it only if something happens to me. Do you understand? Only if you have no other choice. Naruto's small hands shake around the paper. What's happening? Who's out there? I don't know yet. That's true, and it's also the most frightening part of this entire situation. 30 years of careful anonymity, and she still has no idea whether this is root, or hunterine from some old grudge, or simple opportunists who somehow stumbled onto something they shouldn't have. But I need you to trust me the way you trusted me on your very first day here. Stay behind me. Stay quiet. And if I tell you to run, you run, and you don't look back to check on me. Promise me. I don't want to leave you. Promise me, Naruto. Her voice cracks, just slightly, 30 years of careful composure straining under the weight of a fear that isn't for herself at all. Please. He nods, tears already threatening, small fist closing tight around the seal. I promise. The first attacker doesn't bother announcing themselves. Toki senses the shift in pressure a half-second before the porch's support beam splinters under an unseen strike, and she's already moving, shoving Naruto behind her and toward the kitchen's back corner, putting her own body between him and the sudden, violent chaos crashing into what was, 30 seconds ago, a peaceful morning lesson. 4 masked figures in featureless gray, faces hidden behind blank porcelain, not the animal-themed masks of Konoha's official ANBU Corps, but something plainer, more anonymous, the kind of deliberate blankness that speaks to an organization that doesn't want its operatives identified even by their own allies. Toki doesn't need confirmation to know exactly who sent them. Only one organization in this village operates with that particular flavor of cold, deniable efficiency. Uzumaki Toki. The lead figure's voice is flat, mechanically calm, betraying absolutely nothing. Stand down. We're not here for you. Then you've already made your first mistake, Toki says, and there's an edge in her voice that hasn't surfaced in 30 years of careful, quiet living, something old, something that remembers exactly what it felt like to fight for a home that mattered, right before that home burned to the ground anyway. She's not a combat specialist. She was 17 and medic trained when Uzumaki fell, and 30 years of isolation haven't turned her into some hidden taijutsu prodigy. But she's an Uzumaki, and even a medic-trained Uzumaki carries Fuinjutsu instincts that most shinobi villages would kill to have, and in the half-second it takes the lead operative to close the distance, Toki's hands are already flashing through a sequence of seals faster than eyes untrained in her clan's specific style could easily follow. A barrier snaps into existence around the small house, not combat grade, not built to withstand a sustained assault, but enough to buy precious seconds, enough to force the 4 operatives to slow, reassess, redirect their approach. Impressive, the lead figure says, utterly unbothered, already circling to find a weak point in the hastily erected barrier. Consistent with the old reports, Uzushio trained few in jutsu, even in support personnel. A pause. We were told you'd have the boy well guarded. We weren't told you'd fight. You were told wrong about a great many things, Toki snaps, already weaving a second layer of seals, sweat beading at her temple from the sheer chakra cost of maintaining defensive fuinjutsu she hasn't practiced at this intensity in decades. Get away from this house. Behind her, pressed into the corner of the kitchen exactly where she left him, Naruto watches with wide, terrified eyes as his teacher, the woman who's spent the last week gently teaching him to breathe, to sit still, to trust something quiet and unfamiliar inside himself, throws herself bodily between him and 4 trained shinobi with a ferocity that doesn't match the calm, careful person he's come to know over the past 7 days. And somewhere behind his own ribs, that same terrible, familiar heat starts building again. The barrier holds for almost 90 seconds, an eternity in a fight like this, before the lead operative finds the seam Toki hasn't had time to properly reinforce, and the whole structure shatters outward in a spray of disrupted chakra. Toki staggers back, chakra reserves already strained from the barrier's cost, and barely gets a kunai up in time to deflect a strike aimed at disabling rather than killing. Danzo's orders, evidently, prioritize information over elimination, which is the only reason Toki is still standing at all 30 seconds into direct combat with 4 coordinated operatives. She's good. Decades of quiet, careful vigilance have kept her sharper than her isolated life might suggest. But good isn't the same as enough, not against 4 trained shinobi working in concert. And Naruto watches from the kitchen corner as a strike he doesn't fully process gets past her guard and sends her crashing into the wall hard enough to crack the wood paneling behind her. Toki! The scream tears out of him before he can stop it, and every carefully constructed piece of the plan, stay quiet, stay hidden, only use the seal if you have no other choice, dissolves in the space of a single heartbeat. Toki forces herself upright, blood at her temple, breathing hard, and manages to catch Naruto's eye across the wrecked remains of her front room. The seal, she gasps. Now Naruto. He's already moving, small hands fumbling with the paper seal she gave him, activating it with trembling fingers exactly the way she taught him during the 10 rush seconds before this whole nightmare began. And somewhere miles away, in a quiet office overlooking a village that has no idea what's happening in this clearing, a matching seal on Hiruzen Sarutobi's desk flares briefly to life, and the old Hokage is on his feet and moving before the glow has even fully faded, but that help is minutes away. This fight is happening right now. The lead operative, momentarily distracted assessing whether the activated seal changes their timeline, turns his attention fully toward the boy in the corner for the first time. And that's the mistake that changes everything. There he is, the operative says, almost gently, taking a slow step toward Naruto with the calm, patient confidence of someone who's already decided how this ends. Come now. This doesn't need to be difficult. Naruto presses himself against the wall, terror and fury tangled together in his small chest in a combination that's almost impossible to separate, watching Toki struggle to rise behind the advancing figure. Watching blood trickle from her temple, watching everything about this moment mirror the alley from 3 weeks ago except worse, because this time someone he cares about is bleeding because of him. I don't want this to happen again. I don't want to lose someone else. The heat behind his eyes stops flickering and catches like dry kindling finally finding a spark. If you remember Chapter 1, you already know what a fully activated Sōseigan looks like, the spiral pattern, the violet-red blooms spreading from the pupil. The way reality itself seems to hold its breath around whoever's carrying it. What you haven't seen yet is what happens when that same eye activates not out of pure instinctive survival, but out of something closer to choice. A small boy deliberately, consciously refusing to let someone else pay the price for his existence. It's about to look very, very different. The operative closes the last few steps between himself and Naruto, reaching out with one gloved hand, and stops. Not because anything blocks him. Not because any visible force intervenes. He simply stops, mid-motion, hands suspended in the air exactly like the scarred man's kunai 3 weeks ago, except this time there's no confusion in his masked, blank expression, only a kind of professional, clinical alarm, because this operative has been trained his entire life to recognize the signature of a genjutsu, a physical block, a chakra-based restraint, and whatever's happening to his arm right now matches none of those categories at all. Report, he says, voice tight, directed at nothing, the reflexive instinct of a root operative even in the middle of an inexplicable crisis. Movement halted. Cause unknown. Naruto's eyes have gone full spiral now, that impossible violet red bleeding out from his pupils, and the pressure that rolls off him this time isn't the raw, unfocused wave from the alley. It's something quieter, more controlled, more directed, like a held breath finally released with purpose instead of panic. The 3 remaining operatives immediately shift focus, closing in from 3 different angles, clearly recognizing the same threat pattern their teammates' earlier report warned them about. But they're too slow. Behind them, Toki, blood still trickling from her temple, watches with wide, disbelieving eyes as thin, glowing threads of chakra, not chains yet, not the full chains of creation her grandmother's stories once described, just early, unstable tendrils of something that clearly wants to become chains, erupt from the ground beneath each remaining operative's feet, wrapping around ankles, wrists, anything they haven't pulled clear fast enough. It's rough. It's unpolished. A 6-year-old with 1 week of meditation training has absolutely no business producing anything this coherent, and Toki understands, watching it happen in real time, that what she's witnessing isn't skill or technique at all. It's raw, desperate, undeniable will. The exact quality her grandmother always insisted mattered more to this bloodline than anything else. 2 of the 3 operatives break free within seconds, chakra reserves and combat experience letting them tear through the unstable tendrils before they fully solidify. But it's enough. Enough disruption, enough confusion, enough precious lost seconds for Toki to force herself fully upright, snatch a second prepared seal from her emergency kit, and slam it against the floorboards with the last of her reserves. The resulting flash of light and displaced chakra isn't an attack. It's an old Uzushio evacuation seal, decades in use but still functional, and in the half-second of blinding disorientation it produces, Toki grabs Naruto and moves, putting real distance between them and the 4 root operatives before any of them fully recover. They don't make it far. Toki's chakra reserves are nearly spent, and Naruto, his brief, unstable activation already fading, his small body trembling with an exhaustion far beyond anything a 6-year-old should be capable of surviving, collapses against her side after barely 30 seconds of running. They're cornered again, in a shallower ravine a few hundred meters from the house, when the 4 masked operatives catch up. But by then, help has finally arrived. Hiruzen Sarutobi does not arrive quietly. The 3rd Hokage crashes into the ravine with 3 ANBU at his back and an expression that hasn't been seen on his face in years. The particular cold fury of a man who has spent decades trying to be patient, diplomatic, restrained, and has just run out of every last reserve of that patience in the space of a single desperate sprint across the countryside. The 4 root operatives freeze the instant his chakra signature registers, and for just a moment, the entire ravine holds its breath. Stand down. Hiruzen's voice carries none of the gentle warmth Naruto's used to hearing from him. This is the voice of a man who commanded through 2 shinobi world wars, who has ended lives when the situation demanded it, and every trained shinobi standing in that ravine recognizes exactly how close to that line he's currently standing. The lead operative hesitates for exactly 1 second, weighing orders against survival instinct, before making the only rational choice available. A hand seal, a burst of smoke, and all 4 root operatives vanish into the surrounding treeline, retreating rather than risking direct confrontation with the Hokage himself. Hiruzen doesn't pursue. His priorities, in this moment, are lying in the ravine in front of him, Toki, bleeding and utterly spent, and Naruto, unconscious in her arms, small chest rising and falling in the shallow, exhausted rhythm of a body that's spent far more than it had to give. Medical team, now, he snaps to his ANBU, already crossing the distance to kneel beside them both. Toki, I'm fine, she manages, though her voice betrays exactly how untrue that is. Hiruzen, he's the one who needs, he activated it, he actually activated it, And it worked, it bought us enough time, but the cost, I don't know how much it cost him. He'll be seen to immediately. You both will. Hiruzen's jaw is tight with a fury he's carefully banking down for the moment, all his attention on the immediate crisis in front of him rather than the larger, more dangerous question of exactly who sent 4 root pattern operatives after a 6-year-old and a reclusive Uzushio survivor. That question will get its answer. Just not right this second. Naruto wakes up in an unfamiliar bed 2 days later, not the Konoha hospital this time, but a small, secure room deep within the Hokage's own residence, heavily warded, heavily guarded, the kind of precaution reserved for situations Hiruzen considers genuinely dangerous rather than merely concerning. Toki is in the chair beside his bed when his eyes finally open, a bandage still wrapped around her temple, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hasn't left that chair much at all over the past 2 days. Hey, she says softly, relief playing on her weathered face. There you are, Toki. Naruto's voice comes out cracked and small. Are you okay? Those guys, I thought. I'm okay. Sore, but okay. She reaches out and gently brushes his hair back from his forehead, a gesture that catches them both slightly off guard with how natural it feels despite only knowing each other a week. You saved us, you know. Both of us. That wasn't luck, Naruto. That was you. Naruto's face crumples, exhaustion and fear and something like shame all tangled together. I didn't mean for you to get hurt. If I'd figured it out sooner, if I'd been better at the training. No. Toki's voice is firm, immediate, cutting off the spiral before it can fully form. Don't you dare do that. You were 7 days into training a bloodline most of our clans spent entire lifetimes never fully mastering, and you still found a way to protect both of us against 4 trained shinobi. That is not a failure, Naruto. That is the single most remarkable thing I have ever personally witnessed. He sniffles, not quite believing her, but wanting to. Who were they? Why'd they want me? Toki's expression darkens, and she glances briefly toward the door, when Naruto can just make out the shape of an ANBU guard station directly outside. That's a conversation for when the Hokage joins us, but I want you to hear this from me first, before anyone else says it. None of what happened is your fault. Not not the men who came after us. Not any of it. Do you understand me? Naruto nods, though the shadow of guilt doesn't fully lift from his young face. A shadow that, if we're being honest, is going to linger with him for a lot longer than either of them would like. Down the hall, in a private meeting Naruto isn't invited to, Hiruzen Sarutobi is having a conversation that requires every ounce of the diplomatic restraint he's spent decades cultivating, because sitting across from him, calm and utterly composed, is Danzo Shimura, and both men know exactly what this meeting is really about, even though either one says it directly. For masked operatives, unmarked equipment, attacking an isolated civilian residence 2 days' travel from the village, Hiruzen says, voice deceptively even. You wouldn't happen to have any insight into who might be responsible, Danzo? None whatsoever. Danzo's single visible eye doesn't so much as flicker. Missing mean, perhaps? Or a rival village testing our border security. The Land of Fire has enemies enough without needing to invent conspiracies within our own walls, Hiruzen. An interesting theory, Hiruzen says, except for one detail. My A&B recovered a fragment of standard-issue root communications seal at the scene. Damaged, but not damaged enough to be entirely unreadable. For the briefest moment, so brief that a lesser observer might miss it entirely, something flickers behind Danzo's composed expression. Then it's gone, buried back under decades of practiced control. If such a fragment exists, Danzo says smoothly, I'd be very interested to examine it myself. Root's protocols are quite strict, Hiruzen. If one of my operatives acted outside sanctioned parameters, I assure you the consequences will be severe. It's a perfect non-denial, an acknowledgement wrapped in enough plausible deniability to survive any formal inquiry, and both men understand precisely what just happened in this room even though nothing has technically been admitted at all. Hiruzen leans forward, and for just a moment, the careful diplomatic mask slips enough to show the cold fury underneath. Hear me clearly, old friend. Whatever interest you or your organization has developed in that boy, whatever theories you're building about what he's capable of, it ends here. Today, If I find so much as a whisper of root activity near him again, I will not extend you the courtesy of a private conversation next time. Danzo's expression remains perfectly, infuriatingly calm. You misunderstand my concerns, Hiruzen. I only ever act in this village's best interest. Then perhaps, Hiruzen says, standing, ending the conversation on his own terms, you should reconsider exactly what this village's best interest actually looks like. It has never once meant treating a child like a weapon to be seized before someone else claims him first. He leaves without waiting for a response, because he already knows, with grim, weary certainty, exactly what kind of response he'd get. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. It's simply moved, for now, back into the shadows where Danzo prefers to operate, and Hiruzen knows better than anyone that patience is one of the most dangerous weapons in that particular man's arsenal. 3 days later, once Naruto's chakra reserves have stabilized and Toki's injuries have healed enough for travel, Hiruzen sits down with both of them to discuss what happens next, and it's not the conversation Naruto is expecting. You're not going back to the clearing, Hiruzen says gently, watching Naruto's face fall immediately. Not to live full-time, not anymore. It's too isolated, too easy to target without the village's protection nearby. But Toki, I'm not leaving either, Toki says firmly, before Naruto can spiral into panic. We've discussed this, Hiruzen and I. I'm relocating, quietly, under a new identity, into a residence within the village itself, close enough that your training doesn't have to stop, far enough removed from public attention that we're not simply inviting the same danger back into a more crowded space. Naruto's eyes go wide with relief. You're staying? Really? Really? Toki's smile is small but genuine. I told you already, Naruto. I spent 30 years hiding out of fear, and it never actually kept me safe, it just kept me alone. I'm done running from that particular mistake. Hiruzen nods, satisfied with the arrangement they've spent the past 3 days carefully working out. You'll continue at the academy as normal, Naruto, a regular student, nothing that draws unusual attention. Training with Toki will continue on weekends and evenings, under much tighter security than before. And this, his expression turns serious, stays between the 4 of us who already know, myself, Toki, and the 2 A and BU I trust enough to have read into this fully. No one else. Not your classmates, not your other instructors. Not even Irika, for now, much as it pains me to keep secrets from him. Naruto absorbs all of this with the particular gravity of a 6-year-old trying very hard to understand adult problems that are, frankly, a lot bigger than he is. Okay, he says finally. I understand. I'll be careful. I know you will, Hiruzen says, and means it, though the weight of everything still ahead of this small boy sits heavy in his chest as he says it. Now go get some rest. Both of you, you've more than earned it. Here's the thing about time, though. Even in a story like this one, even after a crisis as intense as what just happened in that ravine, life eventually settles back into a rhythm. And what follows over the next several years isn't a single dramatic event so much as a slow, steady accumulation of small ones. Naruto graduating from clumsy first-day meditation into genuine, controlled activation. Toki settling into her new, quiet life within the village walls, her modest home becoming the one place Naruto always feels completely, unguardedly himself. Academy years passing the way academy years do, friendships, rivalries, the particular chaos of growing up loud and orange and determined in a village that's slowly, gradually starting to notice him for reasons that have nothing to do with the fox sealed inside him. The Sōseigan doesn't stay a secret forever, not really. Not once Naruto starts genin missions, not once his training with Toki starts producing results too significant to fully hide behind academy walls. But by the time it truly comes into the light, in front of the wider shinobi world, in front of rivals and allies and enemies who have absolutely no idea what they're looking at, Naruto isn't 6 years old anymore, fumbling through his very first meditation session. He's 12. He's about to enter the Chunin exams. And an eye that predates the Rinnegan itself is about to make its first real, undeniable appearance in front of the entire shinobi world, starting with a boy named Niji Hyuga, who has absolutely no idea what he's about to walk into. 6 years is a long time to keep a secret. It's an even longer time to train in the dark. sitting on a porch with an old woman who used to be a stranger and is now the closest thing Naruto's ever had to a mother. Today, all of that quiet, hidden work finally steps out into the light, in front of the entire Shinobi world, in the one place secrets go to die, the Forest of Death. If you've been waiting for the moment this story goes from hidden bloodline to the whole ninja world just found out, this is it. Let's get into Chapter 5. Chapter 5, The Forest Doesn't Keep Secrets. 12-year-old Naruto Uzumaki stands at the gates of Training Ground 44 wearing the same orange jacket you know from canon, the same headband tilted at the same stubborn angle, the same too-wide grin plastered across his face for the benefit of anyone watching. If you didn't know better, if you hadn't spent the last 6 years watching this boy grow up in the careful, deliberate shadow of a bloodline older than the Sage of Six Paths himself, you'd assume he's exactly what everyone else in this exam assumes he is. Loud. Reckless. Underestimated. That last part, at least, is about to stop being true. Behind him, Sakura fusses over her pack one more time, and beside her, Sasuke stands with his usual detached calm, arms crossed, eyes already scanning the tree line like he's cataloging every threat before the exams even started. Team 7 hasn't changed much from the story you already know. Kakashi's still their sensei. The wave missions still happened roughly on schedule. Sasuke's rivalry with Naruto has simmered along at its usual intensity. The surface of this story looks almost exactly like the one you grew up watching. It's what's underneath that's different. 6 years of weekend and evening sessions with Toki have turned a 6-year-old's 40-minute meditation into something Naruto can now hold for hours without strain. 6 years of careful, incremental training have turned that first unstable burst of ground tendrils in a ravine into something he can call up and dismiss with genuine, deliberate control. Not mastery, not yet, but control, which according to Toki is worth more than raw power at this stage of anyone's training. He hasn't used it in front of his team. Not once. Hiruzen's rule has held for 6 years. The Sōseigan stays hidden until there's no other choice. Even Kakashi, sharp as he is, has only ever caught the faintest hints that something's different about his blonde student's chakra signature. Hints he's chosen, for reasons of his own, not to push on yet. But the Forest of Death has a well-earned reputation for taking careful plans and grinding them into something unrecognizable. And in about 6 hours, Naruto's careful, hidden training is going to collide head-on with exactly the kind of crisis that first cracked this eye open in a dark alley 6 years ago. Let's talk about the scroll situation first, because it matters for what's coming. Team 7 draws a heaven scroll at the gate, same as canon, no changes there, which means somewhere in this sprawling, monster-infested forest, they need to find a team carrying an earth scroll and take it from them, one way or another, before the 5-day clock runs out. Sakura's nervous. Sasuke's confident, in that quiet, controlled way he always is. And Naruto is bouncing on the balls of his feet at the starting gate, doing his level best to look like an ordinary, excitable genin instead of someone who's spent the last 6 years learning to listen to a bloodline that predates recorded shinobi history. The gates open. The exam begins. And for the first several hours, this story actually does follow the shape you already know. Team formation checks, a few tense near misses with other genin teams, the oppressive, watchful quiet of a forest that seems to be actively hunting anyone foolish enough to relax inside it. It's on the second day that everything changes. Team 7 has just secured a temporary campsite near a shallow stream. Kakashi's rule of thumb: never sleep near open water if you can avoid it. But sometimes exhaustion makes the trade-off worth the risk. When Sakura's sharp intake of breath alerts the other two to a presence none of them sensed approaching. 3 genin, forehead protectors marked with the symbol of aim, rain country, step out from the tree line with the deliberate, unhurried confidence of a team that's already decided this encounter ends in their favor. Heaven scroll, the lead genin says without preamble, eyes flicking dismissively over Sakura and Naruto before settling, with clear interest, on Sasuke. Hand it over, and we'll make this quick. Sasuke's hand drifts toward his kunai pouch. Not a chance. What follows is a fight that, on paper, should be entirely survivable. 3 genin against 3 genin, roughly even numbers, roughly even stakes. But these 3 AIM genin aren't ordinary competitors. They're carrying something in their kit that none of Team 7 anticipated. A modified poison, thick and dark, coated along the edge of specially notched kunai. Designed specifically to incapacitate rather than kill outright, because a poisoned, helpless opponent is so much easier to rob than a dead one. Sakura takes the hit meant for Sasuke. It happens fast, a blur of movement, a shout, a decision made in a fraction of a second that Sakura will later insist, fiercely, she doesn't regret even slightly. And then she's on the ground, a shallow but deeply poisoned gash along her forearm, already going pale and shaking as the toxin starts working its way through her bloodstream. Here's where I need you to understand exactly what's at stake in the next 60 seconds. Because this is the moment 6 years of hidden training either proves itself or doesn't. Kakashi is a full day's travel away, tracking a different threat entirely based on the tower's most recent security reports. A decision made hours earlier when the team split briefly to cover more ground. A decision that felt reasonable at the time, and now feels like the worst mistake of Naruto's entire life. There's no sensei to swoop in and save the day. There's no convenient last-minute rescue waiting in the wings. There's just Naruto, Sasuke, and a rapidly worsening poison that none of them have the antidote for. Sasuke engages the remaining 2 AIM genin with brutal, controlled efficiency, buying time. But he's 1 genin against 2, and even with his considerable skill, the equation isn't in his favor for long. Naruto drops to Sakura's side, hands hovering uselessly over her wound, panic rising in his chest in a way that feels sickeningly, horribly familiar. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this. I'm going to watch someone else get hurt because of me again. Except this time, that thought doesn't spiral into helpless panic the way it might have 6 years ago. This time, underneath the fear, there's something else. 6 years of Toki's careful, patient voice in his head, 6 years of learning to recognize the specific, quiet stillness that lets the Sōseigan actually respond instead of just flicker uselessly at the edges of a crisis. Breathe. Don't force it. Just listen. Naruto closes his eyes for exactly 1/2 second, an eternity in the middle of a fight, an impossibly brief moment in every other sense. And when he opens them again, that familiar spiral pattern blooms across his irises, violet red and steady in a way it's never quite managed to be steady before. Naruto? Sakura's voice is weak, slurred, fear playing on her pale face. Your eyes, hold still, he says, and his own voice surprises him with how calm it comes out. I'm gonna try something. I don't totally know if it'll work, but I'm gonna try. He presses both hands against the wound on her arm. And for the first time in a real combat situation, in front of witnesses who have absolutely no idea what they're looking at, Naruto reaches for the ability Toki has spent years carefully, patiently teaching him to access. Not a chain, not a defensive barrier, but the eye's oldest and most fundamental gift, restoration. It doesn't look flashy. There's no dramatic burst of light, no visible chain or weapon, nothing that would make for a dramatic freeze frame in an opening credits sequence. It's quiet, almost gentle, a faint golden warmth spreading out from Naruto's palms, sinking into the wound, and Sakura gasps as she feels the poison in her bloodstream simply stop, not neutralized through some counter-toxin. Unmade, the way the kunai strike in that alley was unmade 6 years ago, like her body is remembering, with Naruto's help, exactly what it's supposed to look like without the damage currently spreading through it. The gash on her arm knits closed. Color returns to her face in slow, visible waves. And within 30 seconds that cost Naruto more than he fully understands yet, sweat beading along his hairline, his own chakra reserves dropping at a rate that should genuinely alarm him. Sakura is sitting up, staring at her own unmarked arm in open, disbelieving shock. How, she starts. Later, Naruto cuts in, already turning toward the ongoing fight, where Sasuke is starting to visibly tire against 2 opponents who show no signs of slowing down. We gotta help Sasuke first. The 2 remaining AIM genin, mid-exchange with Sasuke, both feel it at the same moment, a pressure rolling across the clearing that has absolutely nothing to do with killing intent and everything to do with a chakra signature so dense, so unfamiliar, that every trained instinct screaming in the back of their heads immediately reclassifies this fight as something far more dangerous than they signed up for. Sasuke feels it too, and for just a moment, mid-strike, his focus wavers as he catches sight of his teammate standing at the edge of the clearing, eyes burning violet red, and something in his chest tightens with an emotion he doesn't have time to fully examine. Recognition, maybe, of a kind he's felt only once before, staring into his brother's Mangekyo Sharingan in a memory he's spent years trying not to think about. What is that? What is he? Naruto doesn't wait for anyone to process what they're seeing. He steps forward, and the ground beneath the two remaining aim genin ripples with the same faint golden light that just healed Sakura's poisoned wound, except this time, it's not restoration. It's the earliest, most rudimentary version of the chains of creation Toki has spent the last 6 years slowly, carefully helping him build toward. Thin tendrils of glowing chakra erupting from the earth to seize both opponents by the ankles before they can react. It's not seamless. It's not effortless. You can see, in the way Naruto's jaw clenches, and the visible tremor working through his hands, exactly how much this costs a 12-year-old body even with 6 years of preparation behind it. But it works. Both aim genin wrenched off balance, pinned in place just long enough for Sasuke to close the remaining distance and finish the fight with a clean, decisive strike that leaves both opponents unconscious rather than dead, per the exam's unofficial but widely understood rules of engagement. The clearing goes quiet except for the sound of 3 genin breathing hard, and the soft trickle of the nearby stream, utterly indifferent to what just happened beside it. Sasuke turns to look at Naruto, chest still heaving, expression caught somewhere between shock and something that might, in another context, resemble respect. What, he says slowly, was that? Naruto's spiral pattern is already fading, the violet-red bleeding back into ordinary blue, his knees buckling slightly with the same post-activation exhaustion that's followed every real use of the Sōseigan since that very first night in the alley. Long story, he manages, breathing hard. Really, really long story. You saved my life, Sakura says quietly, still staring at her unmarked arm like she's not entirely sure it belongs to her. That poison, I felt it working, I felt myself going numb, and then it's gone. All of it. We should get their scroll, Naruto says, deflecting with the particular skill of someone who's spent 6 years practicing exactly how to redirect this specific conversation, crouching down to check the unconscious aim genin's gear. And figure out somewhere safer to camp before Kakashi-sensei gets back. Can we talk about the eye thing later? Please? Sasuke's gaze lingers on him a moment longer, sharp and assessing in a way that makes it clear this conversation is nowhere near actually over, even if he lets it drop for now. Fine. Later, they find an earth scroll in the unconscious Lee Genin's pack, a lucky, needed break in an otherwise exhausting encounter, and Team 7 retreats to a more defensible position to regroup, patch up what minor injuries remain, and process, each in their own way, exactly what just happened. None of them realize they weren't the only ones watching. If you've read the earlier outline, you already know who's about to enter this story, and trust me, this is the moment his entire plan for these exams changes completely. Because 100 meters up in the canopy, perfectly still, perfectly hidden even from genin with heightened senses, a very particular, very dangerous man has been watching this entire encounter unfold with an expression of slowly dawning, delighted fascination. Orochimaru has infiltrated the forest of death disguised as a Kusanine, exactly the way you already know from canon, with exactly the plan you already know from canon. Corner Sasuke Uchiha, mark him with the curse seal, set in motion the long, patient scheme to claim the last Uchiha's body for himself once the Sharingan matures fully. That plan has occupied every corner of his attention for weeks. Right up until about 90 seconds ago. He watches Naruto's eyes bloom violet-red from his concealed vantage point, watches a poisoned wound simply unmake itself beneath a 12-year-old's palms, watches thin golden chains erupt from solid earth to pin 2 trained genin in place with a technique that resembles absolutely nothing in his considerable, decades-deep catalog of known bloodline limits, and something in Orochimaru's carefully calculating mind quietly, completely reorders its priorities. Uzumaki, he thinks, mind already racing through every scrap of old intelligence he's ever gathered on that clan's fall, every rumor he dismissed years ago as wartime exaggeration, every half-remembered fragment of forbidden research he conducted decades earlier into Yuzushiogakyo's unique Fuinjutsu capabilities. That's not chakra manipulation. That's not any recorded Dōjutsu. That's something else entirely. He's spent his entire life chasing power in every form he can find it. Forbidden jutsu, forbidden research, forbidden experiments that have cost more lives than he's ever bothered to count. He's chased the Sharingan for years specifically because it represents a ceiling most shinobi never even glimpse. But watching what just happened in that clearing, Orochimaru feels something he hasn't genuinely felt in a very long time, the dizzying, electric thrill of discovering a ceiling he didn't even know existed. If that I can undo a wound this cleanly, he thinks, mind already spinning toward dark, familiar territory, what could it undo given true mastery? Age? Decay? Death itself? He doesn't act immediately. Whatever else you can say about Orochimaru, he's patient when patience serves his goals, and right now, patience serves him perfectly. Sasuke's curse seal plan is still worth executing, a fallback, a contingency, a piece on the board he's not willing to abandon just because a more interesting piece has suddenly revealed itself. But the Uchiha is no longer the only prize worth chasing out of these exams. He melts back into the canopy, already reworking weeks of careful planning around this new, thrilling variable, and somewhere in the depths of that reptilian, ambitious mind, a new and considerably more dangerous obsession has just been born. Team 7 doesn't encounter Orochimaru that day. His path and theirs simply don't cross again before the 5-day clock runs out, which spares this particular chapter the direct confrontation you might be expecting right about now. But don't worry, that confrontation is coming. And when it does, it's going to hit very differently than it did in the story you already know. For now, though, let's follow Team 7 through the remainder of their time in the forest, because there's important groundwork happening here that matters for everything still ahead. That night, camped in a more defensible clearing with Kakashi finally back and briefed on the encounter. Briefed, notably, on a carefully edited version that leaves out the specific mechanics of what Naruto did, at Naruto's own quiet, anxious request. Sasuke corners his teammate away from the others, exactly as promised. You said later, Sasuke says, arms crossed, dark eyes fixed on Naruto with an intensity that makes it clear he's not leaving without at least some kind of answer. It's later. Naruto sighs, sitting down heavily on a fallen log, exhaustion from the day's activation still weighing on him more than he wants to admit. I can't tell you everything. I'm not. It's not really my secret to share completely, if that makes sense. But I can tell you it's a bloodline thing. From my mom's side. Uzumaki stuff, real old, real rare. It healed Sakura instantly, Sasuke says, voice flat, cataloging facts the way he catalogs everything. It restrained 2 genin without direct contact. That's not a healing jutsu and it's not ninjutsu, not any category I've ever studied. Yeah, Naruto admits. It's kind of its own thing. Sasuke is quiet for a long moment, staring at him with an expression that's harder to read than his usual controlled indifference. The Sharingan reads movement. Predicts intent. What you did, he pauses, choosing his next words carefully, it didn't predict anything. It just changed what already happened. Undid it. Toki, my teacher, she says it doesn't fight what happens. It just remembers what's supposed to be true, and puts things back that way. Naruto shrugs, a little helplessly. I dunno if that makes sense. It doesn't always make sense to me either, honestly. Something shifts behind Sasuke's eyes, a complicated tangle of emotions that Naruto doesn't fully catch in the dim firelight, somewhere between envy and genuine curiosity, and something almost like grief, the particular grief of a boy who's spent years believing his own inherited power is the only kind that matters, suddenly confronted with proof that there are entirely different categories of strength in the world that have nothing to do with the Uchiha legacy he's spent his whole short life chasing. Keep it that way, Sasuke says finally, standing, turning back toward the camp. Whatever it is. Don't let anyone turn it into something it's not supposed to be. It's about as close to genuine kindness as Sasuke Uchiha gets at this stage of his story, and Naruto, watching him walk away, feels something loosen slightly in his chest, the particular relief of a secret shared, even partially, without immediate disaster following. He has no idea, sitting there in the dim firelight, that somewhere in this same forest, a man who's spent decades chasing exactly the kind of power he just displayed has already decided that Naruto Uzumaki is worth far more careful attention than anyone in this exam ever anticipated. The remaining days in the Forest of Death pass without major incident. Team 7 secures their pair of scrolls, navigates the tower's entry requirements, and emerges on the far side of the exam's first phase considerably more battle-tested than they entered it. Sakura, in particular, spends a great deal of that time quietly, carefully processing what she watched Naruto do, occasionally sneaking glances his way with an expression that's part gratitude, part fascination, part the beginning of a respect for her teammate that's never quite existed in this exact shape before. But the real consequences of what happened in that clearing aren't going to show up in the next few days at all. They're going to show up weeks later, in the preliminary rounds, when word of an unusual Uzumaki technique starts quietly circulating through certain very specific, very dangerous channels that lead, eventually and inevitably, right back to a man who's already decided this eye is worth far more than a single Uchiha bloodline ever was. Back in Konoha, meanwhile, Hiruzen Sarutobi receives Kakashi's official mission report on the second phase encounter, and even through the carefully sanitized language of an official document, it's immediately clear to him exactly what happened in that clearing. He reads it twice, alone in his office, the same way he read Kushina's letter years earlier, and sets it down with a heavy, weary sigh. So much for keeping this contained, he murmurs to the empty room. He'd known, of course, that this moment was coming eventually, that a bloodline this significant couldn't stay hidden forever, especially not once its bearer started taking genin missions and entering exams that put him directly in the path of danger real enough to force a reaction. 6 years of careful secrecy bought Naruto exactly what it was meant to buy him: time to build a foundation strong enough to survive using this power under pressure. But foundations only hold for so long before the walls built on top of them have to stand fully exposed to the weather. He summons Toki that same evening, a quiet visit, carefully timed to avoid drawing attention, and lays out the situation plainly. It's out, he tells her. Not publicly, not officially, but Sasuke Uchiha saw it directly, and Sakura Haruno experienced its effects firsthand. Neither of them are likely to keep quiet about it forever, even with the best intentions in the world. And if my instincts about who else might have been watching that forest are correct, Orochimaru, Toki finishes grimly, having heard enough about the man's history and reputation over the years to understand exactly what his interest would mean. You think he saw it too? I think it's very likely, given how close his known movements that day put him to Team 7's position. Hiruzen's expression is heavy with a particular exhaustion that comes from watching a threat you've spent years trying to prevent finally, inevitably arrive anyway. Which means we're no longer operating on the timeline we hoped for, Toki. Naruto needs to be ready for scrutiny far sooner than either of us planned. Toki is quiet for a long moment, processing the weight of that statement. He's not ready for Orochimaru. Nobody his age would be. No, Hiruzen agrees. But he's about to be tested against exactly that anyway, whether any of us are ready for it or not. He meets her eyes, and there's something almost like an apology in his expression. I need you to accelerate his training. Whatever you've been holding back for later years, whatever techniques you thought he needed more time to grow into, I think we're out of the luxury of that timeline. Toki's jaw tightens, old fear and fierce protectiveness warring plainly across her weathered features. I won't push him past what his body can survive, Hiruzen. Not even for this. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to trust that boy the same way you have for 6 years, and to give him every tool you can, as fast as you safely can, because I have a very bad feeling that the world is about to start moving faster than any of us are prepared for.